If you've been keeping up with Formula One, you might already be aware of how Australian racing star Daniel Ricciardo's career was left hanging by a thread after McLaren's shocking announcement that the 8-time Grand Prix champion will be dropped at the end of the 2022 Formula One season, despite having a contract for 2023. What's more, Ricciardo himself admitted that he won't be racing in F1 this year. Let's take a closer look. First up, did McLaren drop Ricciardo for real? Ricciardo's recently revealed that he didn't want to walk away from McLaren, but the team drove his decision to do so. He's rumored to leave McLaren by the end of the season, after an agreement to a payoff to end the final year of his contract, and is now looking for a new seat to keep his place in the F1 2023 driver lineup. He further admitted that sometimes things just don't work out in your favor, and that he isn't happy about this particular situation, and he doesn't blame himself for it either, since in his own words, it is results driven. It's not my attitude. What's more, when inquired about how and when his relationship with McLaren changed, the young star admitted that there had been some issues from the very beginning, and that after the first few races, he wasn't getting the results he wanted, but the team wanted more out of it. Adding to that, he understands how important it is to move on from certain things in life, and despite receiving this massive loss, Ricciardo remains hopeful and believes that he can turn the situation around soon. We're hoping to see him on the track soon once again. Up next, is Mercedes' reserve role a hit or a miss? Not long after being officially dropped by McLaren, Ricciardo announced that he'll be taking a sabbatical in 2023, but will be back next season better than ever. The F1 star believes that setting himself up for 2024 will prove to be a lot better for his future in the F1 scene, and is even willing to play the role of the reserve driver for Mercedes. This will not only allow him to check out a wide range of options for 2024, but will also allow him to demonstrate his credentials internally at a team like Mercedes, which is something that the star has never been able to do before. However, when inquired about Mercedes, Ricciardo jokingly replied with a no comment, before admitting that he's keeping every option open for not only next year, but for his future career as well, leaving fans speculating about his future in F1. What's more, Mercedes could also prove to be beneficial for Ricciardo in the long run, as he could theoretically put himself in a pole position to replace Lewis Hamilton if he chooses to retire, since his contract ends in 2023, despite Hamilton admitting that he thinks Ricciardo's far too talented for that role and should be on the grid instead. The fact remains that joining Mercedes could be for the best currently. This wouldn't only keep Ricciardo sharp by taking part in test drives, but also allow him to get a better insight into what goes on behind the scenes of the team that continues to beat him constantly. Moving on, will we get to see Ricciardo on the grid again? Despite the star admitting that we won't be seeing him in 2023, the fact remains that when thinking about long-term opportunities for his career, considering if he stays with Mercedes, it seems likely that we'll get to see him back on the grid soon enough. There's always the chance that if Ricciardo manages to impress Mercedes internally, and if Hamilton retires anytime soon, Ricciardo will automatically be on the radar for one of the best seats in F1. What's more, considering how many teams share reserve drivers, he could also get the opportunity to drive as a stand-in with names like Aston Martin, Williams, and ironically, even McLaren itself. Talk about coming full circle. Also, Mercedes might even be able to benchmark Ricciardo against regular drivers, such as George Russell and Hamilton, as they understand how well he fits into the team. Also, Ricciardo would prove to be a very different reserve for Mercedes, as they usually hire younger drivers for that role, seeking to gain experience. If Ricciardo's willing to consider this opportunity, despite it being a downgrade for him if we look at it objectively, then it'd be wise on Mercedes' part to at least think about him taking the reserve role seriously, because at worst, if nothing, then Mercedes would receive a superb reserve driver option with a track record of finishing first, and at the very best, it would have an answer to the dilemma of who to sign after Hamilton retires. Up next, what other options does Ricciardo have now? Considering how he won the Grand Prix 8 times, the guy would have a lot of options after McLaren, but that's sadly not the case. Ricciardo is also certain now that won't be on the F1 grid in 2023, especially considering how Pierre Gasly and Nick de Vries have already signed up to Alpine and AlphaTauri, respectively, for the upcoming season. What's more, there's also the fact that he isn't a frontrunner for any of the 4 remaining gaps on the grid. Plus, a guy who won for Red Bull Racing was never expected to return to what is now AlphaTauri at this point in his career, but Ricciardo seemed a natural target for Alpine until it became evident that Oscar Piastri, Alpine's projected Fernando Alonso replacement, was actually taking over Ricciardo from McLaren. But the fact remains that he did end up choosing McLaren despite all the other offers, so there's as that. This leaves Haas or Williams, with the former interested in having either Ricciardo or Nico Hülkenberg come in to replace Mick Schumacher if they decide against having him a third year. These are the situations Ricciardo is facing currently, but the idea that he might reject both Haas and Williams isn't too absurd. What's more, he's adamant that he wants to stay on the F1 grid at all costs, so he's currently considering his best options, which is where Mercedes comes in. In other news, first up, did Red Bull break Formula One's budget cap? The FIA recently announced cost cap breaches by two F1 teams, out of which one is Red Bull, as they exceeded the $145 million limit in 2021. The FIA didn't reveal the exact amount that Red Bull exceeded, how it managed to do so, and what penalties would be applied, as they said they're determining appropriate action currently. Yikes! Red Bull responded by saying they're disappointed and surprised with the FIA's findings, and that they'll be carefully reviewing their costs in detail again, since they believe their relevant costs remain under the budget mentioned by the FIA. They also have the possibility to appeal against the decision issued by the FIA, but they're waiting for proper rules and regulations to be followed before they come to an official conclusion. What's more, potential penalties for minor breaches include various options, like being reprimanded, reducing drivers, suspension, limitations on testing equipment, and a reduction of the team's cost cap. All of these options don't sound good for Red Bull, and the penalty cost is definitely going to be a hefty one, with over $5 million on the line. Now, that's a huge number. Next up, Verstappen offers to test out wet tires for Pirelli. Considering the recent delay in the Japanese Grand Prix due to rain in Suzuka, it's about time that F1 thinks about cars being able to cope in poor weather conditions. Max Verstappen has recently offered to test out some F1 tire testing in wet weather if it'd help Pirelli come up with better ideas and solutions for tackling the rainy season. The biggest risk is obviously the driver's safety and whether the tires can cope with excessive water on the tracks without the risk of aquaplaning. What's more, Verstappen believes that the tires in the past were a lot sturdier when it came to handling unfavorable weather conditions and hold out for a lot longer compared to recent ones, which need to be changed to extreme ones after 2 laps max. Sheesh. Lastly, Daniel Ricciardo reveals intense WhatsApp group chat in the recent Japanese Grand Prix. When the race started, Carlos Sainz slid off near the end of lap 2 and hit the barrier hard, automatically bringing in a red flag and a safety car as well. However, Pierre Gasly, who started the race from the pit lane, tried to cover the distance as cars piled up behind him, managing to reach an incredibly insane on-track speed of 250 km per hour when he spotted the safety crane on the track. The French racer barely managed to survive and confessed that he was scared for his life. Yikes! When asked about the risky incident, Daniel Ricciardo revealed that all the drivers actually have a WhatsApp group chat where they were talking about the incident right as it was happening. He admitted that the chat was blowing up from concerns to complaints against the FIA. What's more, everyone including Jules Bianchi's father to Ricciardo slammed the FIA over making such an insanely risky decision by placing the rescue crane on the track while there were still cars on it. To make matters worse, the rain was already lowering visibility and the spray from the cars made it even harder to see. The FIA responded by giving out 2 penalty points to the future Alpine recruit for speeding. Unbelievable. Well, that's a wrap for this video. Do you think Ricciardo's decision to partner with Mercedes is good for his F1 future? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you at the next one.